The moment my son's words hit me, I felt like I'd been slapped across the face. I forgot to buy your ticket. Go home. 6 words, 6 simple words that shattered 62 years of motherhood in seconds. We stood there in the international terminal, crowds rushing past us, my suitcase clutched in my trembling hands. The airline attendant looked at me with pity as she repeated, "I'm sorry, ma'am. There's no reservation under your name." My son Terrence wouldn't meet my eyes. He adjusted his expensive watch, the one I'd helped him buy for his first big job interview, and sighed like I was inconveniencing him. "Mama, don't make this into something it's not," he whispered harshly. "Just go home. We'll sort it out later." But there was no later. Not when his girlfriend Shanice smirked behind her sunglasses. Not when I realized I'd emptied my savings account, $40,000, for a vacation I wouldn't be taking. But the villa deposits, the excursions, all the money I gave you. My voice cracked as the words spilled out. He checked his phone, irritated. "Final boarding call for first class. We need to go." First class. My son was flying first class with my money while I stood there holding a suitcase filled with new clothes I'd bought specially for this trip, this dream vacation he'd promised would be my reward for years of sacrifice. "Terrence, please," I begged, not caring who heard me, not caring about the tears streaming down my face. "I sold my wedding ring to help with the deposits." Something flashed across his face then. Not guilt, not shame, but annoyance. Pure, cold annoyance. "Not now, Mama," he hissed, grabbing Shanice's hand. "Just go back to your little house and your little life. I've got investors waiting for me in Bali." As they walked away, I stood frozen, clutching my boarding pass that wouldn't scan, watching my own flesh and blood disappear through the gate without looking back once. A security guard approached me. "Ma'am, are you all right?" I wasn't all right. I would never be all right again. "Where are you watching from today?" I ask because I need to know I'm not alone in this moment. Have you ever trusted someone with everything you had, only to watch them walk away with it all? Drop a yes in the comments if you've ever been betrayed by family. That day at the airport was just the beginning. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't have imagined as I dragged my suitcase back through the terminal with tears blurring my vision, was that my son hadn't forgotten anything. The moment I realized my son had been planning this betrayal all along was still coming. And it would be far worse than being abandoned at an airport gate. I wasn't always this broken. Once I was a little girl with pigtails in Mobile, Alabama, running through cotton fields with my 6 siblings, laughing under the southern sun. We didn't have much. Daddy worked at the paper mill, Mama took in laundry, but we had each other. "Lorraine," my daddy would tell me, holding my small hand in his calloused one, "family is your wealth. Don't ever put money above blood." Those words became my religion. I believed them with every fiber of my being. I met Charles Johnson when I was 19 at a church social. He wasn't flashy like the other boys. He was quiet, solid, with plans for our future drawn out in his mind like blueprints. We married quickly, me in a simple white dress my mother had sewn, him in his only good suit. We built our life brick by brick, a small house on the edge of town, a garden I tended each spring, and eventually our 2 beautiful children. Terrence came first, a strong, handsome boy with his father's eyes and a confidence that made strangers smile. Melanie followed 3 years later, thoughtful, gentle, always with a book in her hand. Charles would carry them on his shoulders, promising them the stars, while I watched, my heart so full it hurt. But life doesn't honor promises, not even the ones made by good men. I was hanging laundry the day it happened. Charles had gone to work at the construction site, as usual, kissing me goodbye, telling me he'd bring home chicken for dinner. The phone rang at 2:17 p.m. The foreman's voice was low, apologetic. Heart attack. So sudden. Nothing could be done. I was 38, Terrence was 12, Melanie was 9, and Charles was gone. The funeral bills cleaned out our savings. The mortgage still needed paying. 2 children still needed raising, so I became what circumstances demanded. A nurse by day, a waitress by night, a mother in the moments between. I remember Terrence asking me once, "Mama, why don't you ever rest?" I didn't have the heart to tell him that rest was a luxury I couldn't afford, not when his future hung in the balance. College was always the dream. Charles and I had whispered about it late at night. Our son, a college graduate. So when Terrence got accepted to Howard University, I sold everything valuable I owned. My wedding ring, the pearl necklace Charles had given me on our 10th anniversary, even the small gold cross that had been my grandmother's. The day I dropped him off at that beautiful campus, he hugged me tight, whispering, "Mama, I'll never forget what you've done for me." I drove home crying, not from sadness, but from pride. My son would have the life Charles and I had dreamed for him. And he did rise. Degree in finance, job at a prestigious firm in Atlanta, expensive suits, luxury car, a condo with a view of the city. Each success story he shared made my sacrifice seem worthwhile. Melanie took a different path. She became a teacher at an elementary school in Birmingham, just an hour's drive from me. Her apartment was small, her car modest, but every Sunday she'd drive over after church, bringing me flowers and sitting at my kitchen table, telling me stories about her students. Over time, I noticed the differences more sharply. Melanie called daily. Terrence's calls became monthly, then special occasions only. Melanie remembered every birthday. Terrence sent expensive but impersonal gifts, often late. Melanie would help me with house repairs. Terrence would ask, "Why didn't she just hire someone?" "He's busy, Mama," she would say when she caught me staring at the phone. "Success takes time." I believed her. I had to, because the alternative meant all my sacrifice had bought was my son's absence. Then came the phone call that would drain my life savings and break my heart beyond repair. It was a Sunday afternoon in April. I remember because my azaleas were blooming and I'd just come back from church. The phone rang and Terrence's name flashed on the screen, a rare enough occurrence to make my heart jump. "Mama!" His voice was warm, excited, like it used to be when he was a boy. "I've been thinking about everything you've done for me over the years." I sat down, surprised by this sudden reflection. "That's sweet, baby, but mothers don't need thanks." "No, Mama, I mean it. You sacrificed so much, and what have I given back? Nothing." There was a pause, and then, "I want to take you on a trip, a luxury vacation to Bali, my treat." "Bali?" I repeated the word like it was from another language. "Indonesia? That's halfway around the world." "Exactly. You deserve to see the world, Mama. White sand beaches, clear blue water, temples on cliff sides. I want to give you this." Tears filled my eyes as I pictured it. Me, a simple nurse from Alabama, walking on exotic beaches thousands of miles from home. A reward for decades of putting everyone else first. "When?" I asked, already mentally rearranging my life to make it happen. 3 months from now. July. Perfect weather there." His enthusiasm was contagious. "I'm booking a private villa, excursions, the works." After we hung up, I danced around my living room like a schoolgirl. I called Melanie immediately. "Terrence is taking me to Bali," I practically sang into the phone. There was a pause before she answered. "That's wonderful, Mama. Did he say why?" "To thank me for everything." The hesitation in her voice didn't register then. I was too caught up in the joy of finally being seen by my son. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. I brought new sundresses, sandals, a wide-brimmed hat, even a swimming costume, though I hadn't been swimming in 20 years. I watched videos about Bali, practiced saying thank you in Indonesian, imagined myself dining in restaurants overlooking the ocean. Then the requests started. "Mama, can you put down the deposit for the villa? My accounts are tied up in this big deal I'm working on." It was $2,500, more than I usually spent in 2 months on everything combined, but I reasoned it was temporary. "Of course, baby, you can pay me back later." A week later, "The excursion company needs payment up front, premium package. Can you cover it until my commission comes through?" $4,000 more. "There's this exclusive resort experience, special dinner on the beach, sunset cruise." Each request came with promises of repayment. "Double what you're putting in, just until the deal closes. Temporary cash flow issue." I dipped into my emergency fund, then my retirement savings. Then I took out a small loan against my house. Have you ever wanted to believe in something so badly that you silence the voice of doubt in your head? Drop a yes in the comments if you've ever trusted someone despite the warning signs. By the time I checked my accounts, I had given him every penny I had saved from my future, $40,000 in total. But I told myself it was worth it, an investment in memories I would cherish forever. A chance to finally spend quality time with my successful son, who was always too busy for regular visits. The night before our departure, I couldn't sleep. I packed and repacked my suitcase, making sure everything was perfect. I set my alarm for 4 a.m., though I was awake long before it rang. This was it, my reward, my moment. If only I had known what awaited me at that airport gate. The Atlanta International Airport buzzed with early morning travelers when I arrived. I'd splurged on a taxi, didn't want to risk being late by taking the bus. My heart fluttered with excitement as I wheeled my new suitcase through the sliding doors, scanning the departures hall for my son. I spotted him near the check-in counters, tall, handsome in his linen suit, looking at his phone. Beside him stood a young woman I'd never seen before, her sleek hair falling to her waist, designer sunglasses perched on her nose despite being indoors. When I approached, Terrence looked up with a start, as if he'd forgotten I was coming. "Mama, you're early." Not a hug, not a smile, just a flat statement. "I didn't want to miss our flight," I beamed, ignoring his tone. I turned to the young woman. "You must be Shanice? I have heard so much about you." A lie. I'd heard nothing about her. Terrence had never mentioned bringing anyone. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my comfortable travel clothes. Nothing fancy, but clean and neat. Was all she said before returning to her phone. "Let's check in," Terrence said briskly, already walking toward the counter. The line moved quickly. When it was our turn, Terrence handed over his passport and Shanice's. The agent typed, smiled, and handed them boarding passes. "And one more," Terrence said, nodding at me. I stepped forward proudly, handing over my passport that I'd renewed specially for this trip, my first ever journey outside the country. The agent's fingers danced across her keyboard. Her smile faded. "I'm sorry, there's no reservation under this name." The words didn't make sense at first. I looked at Terrence, waiting for him to correct the mistake. Check again, I urged the agent. Johnson, Lorraine Johnson. More typing. Nothing, ma'am. No reservation on this flight or any flight today. That's when I noticed Terrence shifting his weight, checking his watch, not meeting my eyes. Terrence? My voice sounded small even to myself. There's some mistake. He sighed, finally looking at me with cold, annoyed eyes I didn't recognize. I forgot to buy your ticket. Go home. The world seemed to stop. Around us, other travelers continued moving, chatting, living their normal lives, while mine cracked in two. You forgot? I repeated, my throat tight. But I've been planning for months. I gave you $40,000. Not here, Mama, he hissed, glancing around. You're making a scene. Shanice snickered behind her hand, whispering something to Terrence that made him smirk. When can I join you? I asked, desperate, confused. I can buy my own ticket for tomorrow's flight. Look, we have a full schedule, business meetings, not really a vacation. He checked the boarding time display. We need to get through security. Business meetings? Not a vacation, but he had promised me temples, beaches, relaxation. The money, I whispered, aware of people watching now. All my savings, your promise. Terrence pulled me roughly to one side, away from curious ears. Stop embarrassing me, he growled. I'll deal with it when I get back. A security officer approached. Everything okay here? Fine, Terrence said smoothly, his public face sliding back into place. My mother is just emotional about goodbyes. The officer looked at me, a crying older woman with sympathy. Ma'am? What could I say? That my son had taken my life savings under false pretenses? That the vacation he had promised was never real? The humiliation burned hotter than the betrayal in that moment. I'm fine, I lied, wiping my tears. Terrence and Shanice walked away then, through the security gates, without a backward glance. I stood frozen, watching them laugh together as they disappeared from view. An announcement echoed overhead. Final boarding call for Flight 372 to Dubai. Dubai? Not Bali? The journey home was a blur of tears and disbelief. I sat on the bus clutching my unused suitcase, fellow passengers casting concerned glances my way. An elderly man offered me a tissue. A young mother asked if I needed help. Their kindness only made me cry harder. How many of you have ever felt completely betrayed by someone you thought you could trust? Type betrayed in the comments if you understand this pain. I shuffled into my empty house hours later, the excitement that had filled it that morning now replaced by a crushing silence. I left my suitcase by the door, unable to face unpacking all those new clothes I'd bought for a trip that never existed. With shaking hands, I picked up my phone to call Melanie, but something stopped me. Shame? Pride? I couldn't bear to admit how foolish I'd been. Instead, I logged on to my online banking account, hoping that somehow I was wrong about how much I had given him. The balance stared back at me. $147.23. My entire life savings. Gone. But that wasn't even the worst part. What I discovered when I got home made me realize the airport was just the beginning of a nightmare that would shake my family to its core.
The doorbell rang the next morning. I hadn't slept, hadn't changed clothes, hadn't even moved from my kitchen chair where I'd collapsed after checking my bank account. Through swollen eyes, I saw Melanie standing on my porch, concern etched across her face. "Mama." She rushed to me, arms outstretched. I tried calling all night. I couldn't speak, just handed her my phone with the banking app still open. She stared at the balance, then at me. "Tell me what happened," she whispered. The story poured out of me in broken fragments: the promised vacation, the constant request for money, the empty reservation, Terrence walking away without looking back. With each word, Melanie's expression hardened. When I finished, she sat down heavily across from me, rubbing her temples. "Mama," she said finally, "this isn't the first time." My heart skipped. What? Terrence borrowed $15,000 from me last year, said it was for a business investment, something urgent that would pay off big. Her voice cracked. I never saw a penny back. The room seemed to spin. Why didn't you tell me? Her eyes filled with tears. I was embarrassed, and I didn't want to hurt you. You always believed in him so much. I felt sick. Both children, both of my babies, had been fleeced by their own brother. He told me I was the only one who could help him, I whispered. Melanie reached for my hand. He told me the same thing. We sat in silence, the weight of truth crushing us. Then Melanie straightened her shoulders. Mama, we need to check your credit report, now. I didn't understand at first, but I followed her to my ancient desktop computer. She typed quickly, entering my information into a credit monitoring website. What we found stole my breath away. 6 credit cards, all in my name that I'd never applied for. A personal loan for $25,000, all maxed out, all delinquent. Identity theft, Melanie said quietly. But this wasn't some faceless criminal halfway across the world. This was my son, my flesh and blood, the baby I'd nursed the fevers and taught to tie his shoes. Identity theft, I repeated numbly. The evidence glared at us from the screen. Over $80,000 in fraudulent debt, all traced to accounts opened in the last 8 months. The earliest matched the timing of Terrence's first mention of the Bali trip. He was setting you up, Melanie said, her voice trembling with anger, creating a distraction with this vacation while he drained you dry. Something broke inside me then. Not just my heart, something deeper, more fundamental. The sacred bond between mother and child shattered beyond recognition. I collapsed to the floor, wailing like I hadn't since Charles died, primitive sounds of grief tearing from my throat. Melanie held me as I rocked back and forth, my mind unable to process the magnitude of the betrayal. Why? I kept asking. Why would he do this to me? Because he could. Because you loved him too much to believe he would, Melanie answered softly. Hours passed before I could breathe normally again. When I finally looked up, Melanie was on the phone with a lawyer friend discussing identity theft and fraud charges. We have to report him, Mama, she said, covering the receiver. This is criminal. The words hit me like physical blows. Report my own son to the police? See him arrested, charged? What kind of mother would I be? But what kind of mother I had been, that my son could see me as nothing more than an ATM to be drained and discarded? If you're watching this right now, what would you do? Would you protect your child even after such a terrible betrayal? Or would you seek justice? Type protect or justice in the comments. I'd truly like to know what you would choose. As the sun set on the worst day of my life, I realized I had to make the hardest decision a mother could face. Love my son enough to let him face the consequences of his actions, or protect him at the cost of my own future.
3 days later, I stood outside a gleaming glass office building in downtown Atlanta, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my purse. Melanie stood beside me, solid as a rock, while our lawyer, Mr. Patterson, checked his watch. "Are you sure you want to do this in person?" he asked gently. "We could handle this through legal channels." I shook my head. I need to look him in the eyes. I need to know why. The security guard called upstairs, and surprisingly, Terrence agreed to see us. As the elevator climbed to the 24th floor, my stomach knotted with each passing digit on the display. His office suite screamed success. Marble floors, abstract art, a receptionist who looked like she belonged on a magazine cover. She eyed my modest dress with thinly veiled disdain. "Mr. Johnson is in a meeting, but he'll be with you shortly," she said, not offering us a seat or water. 20 minutes later, a deliberate power move, Terrence appeared, immaculate in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. He showed no surprise at seeing us, no shame, not even anger. Just cool, professional detachment. As if we were clients, he was mildly annoyed to accommodate. "Let's talk in my office," he said, not even greeting us. His private office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlanta skyline. Photos of him with celebrities and politicians lined one wall, not a single family photo among them. "I have a conference call in 30 minutes, he said, settling behind his massive desk. "What's this about?" The casual dismissal of what he'd done, what he was still doing to me, ignited something fierce inside me. I slammed my credit report on his desk, hard enough to make his fancy pen holder rattle. "It's about this," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. 6 credit cards, a personal loan, all in my name, all opened by you. His expression didn't change. Not a flicker of shame crossed his face. "And it's about the $40,000 you took from me for a vacation that never existed. Money I saved for 20 years, gone in 3 months because I trusted you." Terrence leaned back in his leather chair, straightening his cuffs. "Is that why you came all this way? To complain about money?" "Complain?" Melanie interjected, her voice tight with fury. "You committed fraud, identity theft. You left our mother stranded at an airport after emptying her accounts." He sighed like we were being unreasonable children. "Business requires capital. Opportunities arise that need quick action. I leveraged available resources." "Available resources?" I repeated incredulously. "I'm your mother, not a bank." "And what exactly has motherhood entitled you to? Eternal gratitude? A return on investment?" The question struck me dumb. Return on investment? Was that how he saw my love? As a business transaction? "You raised me to succeed," he continued, his voice hardening, "to rise above our circumstances, to take what I deserve from a world that gives nothing freely." He gestured around his opulent office. "This is what you wanted from me, isn't it? Success at any cost?" "No," I whispered, horrified. "Not at any cost. Not like this." "You sacrificed everything for me," he countered. "That's what you always said. I gave up everything for you children. Well, I learned that lesson perfectly. Sacrifice others for your own advancement. Isn't that what you taught me?" Each word cut deeper than the last. Had I created this monster with my own martyrdom? Had my sacrifices somehow twisted his understanding of love? Mr. Patterson stepped forward, laying out documents. "We're here to resolve this matter before it becomes a criminal case, Mr. Johnson. We require full repayment of all fraudulently obtained funds, closure of all accounts open without authorization, and a signed admission of guilt." Terrence laughed, actually laughed at the lawyer's words. "Or what? My mother will press charges against her own son? We both know she won't." He looked at me with such certainty, such arrogant confidence in his power over me, that something shifted inside my heart. The little boy I'd loved was gone. This man, this stranger, had calculated my love and found it a weakness to exploit. "You're wrong," I said quietly. "I already have." His smile faltered for the first time. "The police have been notified," Mr. Patterson confirmed. "This meeting is a courtesy, a chance to mitigate damages before arrest warrants are issued." Terrence's face contorted with rage. He stood suddenly, pointing at me. "You ungrateful old woman! After everything I've done for you?" "Done for me?"
I was shouting, years of pent-up disappointment erupting. You've done nothing but take. Take my money, take my trust, take my love and throw it back in my face. You're nothing without me, he roared. A sad, lonely old nurse living in a rundown house, pretending your life mattered because you raised a successful son. Melanie lunged across the desk. Don't you dare talk to her like that. Security guards burst through the door, alarmed by the shouting. One grabbed Melanie, while another positioned himself between us and Terrence. These women are trespassing, Terrence said smoothly, straightening his tie. Please escort them out. We're leaving, Mr. Patterson assured them, gathering his documents. But this isn't over, Mr. Johnson. Not by a long shot. As the guards led us toward the elevator, Terrence called out, You'll regret this, Mama. When you're alone and broke, remember it was your choice. His words followed me into the elevator, ringing in my ears as we descended. I leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. Did I do the right thing? I asked Melanie, doubt clouding my resolve. Yes, she said firmly, squeezing my hand. It's the only way he'll ever learn. If you believe standing up to family members who hurt you is necessary, even when it breaks your heart, hit subscribe now. No one should face this kind of betrayal alone, and this community understands what it means to choose self-respect over emotional manipulation. Outside in the bright sunshine, my phone rang. An unknown number. Mrs. Johnson? A formal voice asked. This is Detective Rivera with the Financial Crimes Unit. We need you to come to the station immediately regarding your son, Terrence Johnson. The phone call that came next changed everything I thought I knew about my son's betrayal.
Detective Rivera was a compact woman with alert eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She led us to a small conference room where another detective and a man in a suit waited. This is Agent Carruthers with the FBI, she said, gesturing to the suit. Your complaint against your son has intersected with an ongoing federal investigation. My knees weakened. The FBI? I don't understand. Agent Carruthers slid a folder across the table. Terrence Johnson isn't just stealing from family members, Mrs. Johnson. We believe he's running a sophisticated investment fraud scheme targeting dozens of victims. Inside the folder were photos of my son with various wealthy-looking individuals, surveillance images from luxury hotels, and documents showing money transfers to offshore accounts. A Ponzi scheme, Detective Rivera explained. He convinces people to invest in non-existent opportunities, uses new investor money to pay small returns to earlier investors, and pockets the rest. The room tilted. My son? A criminal mastermind? The boy who'd once cried when he found a bird with a broken wing? How much? I managed to ask. We've traced just over $4 million in fraudulent investments, Agent Carruthers said grimly. Your complaint about identity theft gave us the probable cause we needed for search warrants. He'll go to prison, I whispered, the reality sinking in. Yes, ma'am, Rivera confirmed without sugarcoating it. Federal charges carry substantial sentences. Melanie gripped my hand under the table. What happens now? We're executing arrest and search warrants this afternoon, Carruthers explained. We wanted to inform you first, given your cooperation. 3 hours later, I sat in the same conference room, watching grainy footage from a security camera as FBI agents led my son handcuffed through his office building's lobby. His face, once so confident and controlled, now showed naked fear as reporters snapped photos. There's something else you should know, Detective Rivera said, turning off the monitor. That trip to Bali, it never existed. I looked up, confused. What do you mean? The tickets he purchased were to Dubai, not Bali. One-way tickets for him and Shanice Porter. She slid flight manifests across the table. We believe they were planning to disappear with the money. Your confrontation at the airport accelerated their timeline. My mind struggled to process this new information. Not only had he stolen from me, but he'd been planning to vanish forever, to a country with no extradition treaty with the United States. He hadn't forgotten my ticket. There was never meant to be one. They've seized his passport at the Dubai airport, Agent Carruthers added. Ms. Porter is being returned to the U.S. as we speak. In the days that followed, my world shrunk to courthouse corridors and legal consultations. Reporters called constantly, neighbors whispered behind their hands, and distant relatives suddenly had opinions about how I should have raised my children. I aged years and weeks, watching my son appear in court in an orange jumpsuit, refusing to look at me in the gallery. The prosecutor outlined a scheme so calculated, so cold-blooded, that it seemed impossible it could have been orchestrated by my child. The defendant specifically targeted elderly individuals with substantial savings, she told the judge. He exploited family connections and trust relationships showing a pattern of predatory behavior. Elderly individuals. That's how they classified me in court documents. Not his mother, just another elderly mark in a con man's game. The most surreal moment came when they brought in Shanice to testify. Gone were the designer clothes and haughty attitude. She looked small in her plain blouse, voice barely audible as she agreed to cooperate in exchange for reduced charges. Terrence told me his mother was an easy target, she testified, staring at her hands. He said she'd been manipulated by guilt her whole life, so it was simple to keep pushing her buttons. Each word was a knife to my heart. He laughed about it, she continued, about how he sold her wedding ring to pay for excursions that didn't exist. He called it poetic justice, taking from her the way she'd taken his childhood with her constant sacrifices and guilt trips. The courtroom faded away as her words sank in. My son hadn't just stolen my money, he'd hated me, resented me, seen my love as a burden, my sacrifices as weapons. The most devastating evidence came on the third day of trial. The prosecutor played audio recordings found on Terrence's computer, conversations he'd had with Shanice about me. She's so desperate for approval, it's pathetic. My son's voice filled the courtroom. All I have to do is act like I'm finally appreciating her sacrifices, and she'll hand over whatever I ask for. Shanice's giggle followed. You're so bad. It's just business, he replied coldly. She made such a big deal about giving up everything for us. Well, now I'm taking it back with interest. I sat frozen, my body numb as more recordings played, each one worse than the last. Terrence meticulously outlining how he'd manipulate my emotions, laughing about my excitement for the fake Bali trip, calculating exactly how much he could extract from me before vanishing to Dubai. The courtroom fell silent when the recordings ended. Even the judge looked shaken. I felt eyes on me, pitying, curious, judging. The shame was overwhelming. The prosecution would like to enter into evidence these text messages, the lawyer continued, displaying conversations on a large screen. Terrence to Shanice. Got Mama to transfer another $5,000. Told her it was for special temple tours, LOL. Shanice. You're terrible. How much more can you get? Terrence. As much as I want. She thinks this trip will finally make us close again. Like I'd waste a week with her when we could be starting our new life. I closed my eyes, unable to look anymore. Beside me, Melanie's hand tightened around mine until both our knuckles turned white. When it came time for sentencing 2 weeks later, the judge asked if I wanted to make a victim impact statement. I had prepared nothing, convinced I couldn't face speaking. But as I stood before the court, words came from somewhere deep inside me. The money doesn't matter, I said, my voice gaining strength with each word. What Terrence stole from me can't be measured in dollars. He stole my trust, my dignity, my belief in the power of a mother's love. I turned to look directly at my son, who finally met my eyes. But he didn't steal my worth or my future. Those aren't his to take.
The judge sentenced him to 7 years in federal prison. As they led Terrence away, he turned to me one last time, his face a mixture of anger and something else. Something almost like regret. "You did this to me," he mouthed silently. Did I? Had my love somehow warped him? Had my sacrifices taught him that people exist to be used? Where is the line between nurturing and enabling, between loving and spoiling? If you're a parent watching this, do you ever worry that your sacrifices might be teaching your children the wrong lessons? Comment boundaries if you believe love must come with limits to be healthy. I walked out of that courthouse a different woman than the one who had entered it weeks before. My bank accounts were empty, my credit ruined, my reputation in tatters. But for the first time in decades, I was thinking about what I needed, not what others needed from me. My decision surprised everyone, including myself, but it would become the foundation of the new life I never expected to build at 62 years old.
The shame came first, crushing, suffocating shame. I stopped going to church, couldn't face the cashier at the grocery store, let my garden wither. For weeks after the sentencing, I barely left my bedroom, convinced everyone was whispering about the foolish old woman who'd been conned by her own son. Melanie practically moved in, forcing me to eat, to shower, to speak. "Mama," she'd say, "his choices aren't your failure." But they felt like my failure. Every headline about the family fraud case seemed written about my shortcomings as a mother. I tortured myself with questions. Had I loved him too much? Not enough? The wrong way? The turning point came on a rainy Tuesday when my doorbell rang. I opened it to find 7 women from my church standing on the porch with casseroles, flowers, and determined expressions. "We're having Bible study here today," announced Mrs. Taylor, our choir director, brushing past me into the house. "My Raymond lost our savings to gambling 30 years ago. Dorothy's daughter stole her identity to buy drugs. Patricia's husband had a second family in Tennessee." They set up in my living room, ignoring my protests, my unwashed hair, my shame. "You think you're the only one who's been betrayed by someone you love?" Mrs. Taylor asked, handing me coffee in my own mug. "Child, that's what this sisterhood is for." For 3 hours, they shared their stories, not with judgment, but with understanding. Stories of betrayal, yes, but also of survival, of rebuilding, of finding strength they never knew they had. "The hardest lesson," said elderly Mrs. Washington, taking my hand, "is learning that loving someone doesn't mean saving them from consequences. Sometimes the most loving thing is to let them face what they've done." I cried that day, really cried, for the first time since the trial. Not for Terrence, not even for the money, but for the woman I'd been. So desperate to be needed that I'd forgotten to value myself. The road back was long. With Melanie's help, I filed for bankruptcy to clear the fraudulent debts. I sold my house, too big and full of memories anyway, and moved into a small apartment near the community's college. With the little equity I had left, I started taking classes in horticulture, turning my lifelong gardening hobby into a new purpose. "You're going back to school at 62? Melanie asked, amazed, when I showed her my course schedule. "Why not?" I replied, surprising myself with the lightness in my voice. "I've got nothing but time now." Slowly, painfully, I rebuilt. My credit score inched up.
My small balcony garden flourished with herbs and flowers that I began selling at the farmer's market. The church sisterhood became my rock, surrounding me with tough love and practical help in equal measure. Melanie and I grew closer than we ever had been. Without Terrence between us, without my blind spot where he was concerned, we discovered a friendship beyond mother and daughter. "You know what's strange?" she said one evening as we potted seedlings on my balcony. "I hated what he did to you, but in some ways, it freed you." I paused, soil crumbling through my fingers. "What do you mean?" "Before, you were always waiting for his calls, his visits, his approval. Now you're living for yourself." She was right. I had spent decades orienting my life around Terrence's needs and validation. Now I was learning to orient it around my own. I took a trip to the beach with the church ladies, my first vacation in 20 years. I adopted a cat from the shelter. I started teaching gardening classes at the senior center. Small things, perhaps, but each one a declaration. I matter. My life matters, not as someone's mother, but as myself. Then, 14 months after Terrence went to prison, a letter arrived with the correctional facility stamp in the corner. My hands trembled as I opened it, unsure what to expect. More manipulation, accusations, demands? The single page contained just 3 sentences. "I'm sorry, Mama, not for getting caught, but for becoming someone who could hurt you. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know." The day I received his letter from prison, I didn't cry. I didn't rush to respond. I simply folded it carefully and placed it in my bedside drawer, next to a photo of my garden in full bloom, a reminder that growth can come from even the most painful pruning.
2 years have passed since the airport betrayal that changed everything. My garden business now supports me completely, small but mine. Melanie is engaged to a kind man who treats me with genuine respect. As for Terrence, he continues to serve his sentence, taking college courses behind bars. We exchange letters occasionally, careful, honest letters between 2 adults with clear boundaries. The other day, a young mother in my gardening class asked me, "After everything, do you regret being so generous with your children?" I thought carefully before answering. I don't regret the love. I regret the lack of boundaries. Love without limits isn't actually love. It's fear disguised as devotion. That's what I want to leave you with today. The greatest gift we can give our children isn't endless sacrifice. It's teaching them that everyone's needs matter, including our own, that actions have consequences, that love can be both tender and firm. You can give your children everything without giving away yourself. In fact, showing them that you value yourself teaches them to do the same, both for themselves and for others. If my story resonates with you, if you've ever loved someone so much you lost yourself in the process, know you're not alone. This community understands the courage it takes to reclaim your worth. Subscribe now to join thousands of others learning to love without losing themselves. We're on this journey together, one boundary at a time. Where are you watching from today? And what lesson from this story speaks most to your heart? Your stories matter here. They remind all of us that while betrayal may break us open, what grows from those broken places can be more beautiful than we ever imagined.